Gout? Carlos looked confused. I thought that was like Henry VIII and all his legs and that. Jeremy grinned. He only had 2, Carlos. People still get gout now, said Molly. Some of the residents at Lilac Tree Lodge suffer from it. It's very painful. Anyway, continued Jeremy, hastily heading off what he could see was about to become a major sidetrack from Carlos, the town sort of grew from there. Visiting the seaside became fashionable. And of course, once it became fashionable, there was money to be made. Quite a lot of money, it seems. For instance, piers that were originally just built as simple wooden landing stages for boats grew into entertainment venues. They started putting on shows and opening booths selling food and drink. Margaret showed us some photographs taken in about 1920. It looked a riot. Carlos stared at him doubtfully. Their local pier didn't look much like an entertainment venue to him. Long and straggling, it looked like a rusty old finger pointing out to sea. The only things on it were a couple of old slot machines that had long since been vandalised, and a few broken benches. Jeremy looked at the expression on his face and smiled. Remember, that was before television and cinema. In those days, people took their fun where they could. Life was simpler then. He paused for a second and then added, albeit usually shorter. Anyway, at the end, Margaret asked if anybody had any questions, and Mike asked if there had been any notable crimes in the area. Carlos leaned forward, interested. What, like murders and that? Jeremy nodded. Yes, like murders and that. There was one particularly horrific murder of a police constable back in 1900. He was beaten by some drunks outside the Mistletoe Hotel on a freezing winter night and left to die. Nobody came to help him. Molly looked horrified. Why not? Jeremy shrugged. I guess they didn't like him. He was called Cornelius Bennett, and he's buried in St. Andrew's churchyard. I might go and pay him a visit the next time I'm out for a walk. And then there was the Victorian wife, Alma something, who poisoned her husband. There seems to have been quite a fashion for poisoning husbands at the time, although there was talk in the town that in this case the accused might have been innocent. Did people think that someone else had given him the poison? Asked Carlos. Possibly, but there was a suggestion that he might have taken it himself, said Jeremy. Some people did in those days. They thought that it was a kind of stimulus or tonic. Carlos looked horrified. What, like taking vitamins? I suppose so. According to Margaret, the widow wasn't without friends. Apparently her husband was a right bus. He paused and checked himself. He'd been a bit too free with the language lately. He didn't want Carlos thinking that it was okay for everyday use. So-and-so, he continued. There must have been some sympathy for her anyway, because she wasn't sentenced to hang. She went to prison. Apparently she was released after 30 years, and she lived until she was 93. He fell silent for a moment. Anything else? Asked Molly. Well, yes. Jeremy spoke slowly, his expression grave. She told us about a series of murders that took place in the 70s. The police never found the person responsible.